Hi guys. Yesterday I sort of picked up on a few things with Dolores Cannon that needed to be added to or corrected upon. And today I want to share a story with you, if you will allow me a few moments. It's a parable, actually. It's called The Garden, The Parable of the Garden by Michael Sharp. And I think that it's very fitting and appropriate to share this little story with you to not only help you understand a little better about our creation story, but to help you understand who you are, who I am, and that this moment we are in right now is our creation story. Okay? So, with that, I'll begin. Oh, I just saw a fairy. Or something, an angel. Imagine a garden, unlike any garden you have ever seen on this earth. Imagine a garden full of flowers and trees, brilliant sights and sounds, sparkling diamond water, and clear emerald forests. Imagine a garden of unbelievable fertility, variety, and bounty. Imagine a garden where life flourishes in peace, love, and joy. Imagine a garden where the only emotions are contentment, bliss, happiness, and love. Imagine a garden where only beauty exists. Call this garden the Garden of Eden, or Shambhala, which is the Tibetan word for heaven on earth. For indeed, it was all of these things and more. Imagine, and when you can imagine all these things at once, put them together and multiply them 1,000,000 times, and then you will have the garden. A place of unimaginable splendor and glory. Now, let me be crystal clear. In the garden, there is no pain or suffering. In the garden, there is no sadness. There is no war. There is no hatred. There is no sin. The garden is perfect in every way and will always remain so, for this is the way the light walkers, the beings of pure love and light who inhabit the garden, want it to be. That's how they want it to be, because they're creators. Okay? Ah, the light walkers, shining, glorious sons of creation, brilliant and blinding to behold. When they created the garden, they created it as a reflection of their perfect, light-filled, love-filled nature. Each heart's desire fulfilled it. Perfection in every way and a mighty great place to live, let me tell you. But you know, things get boring, and so one day a few of the light walkers, let us call them explorers, thought to themselves that maybe, just maybe, a little bit of a change was needed. Maybe things could be better, they said. Maybe we could have more beautiful flowers and trees, more brilliant sights and sounds. Maybe we could have more love and more light and more glory. Maybe. So they put a plan together, and they submitted it to the elders. And they said with great excitement, "Look at the plan. Look at our plan. Isn't it cool? Isn't it wonderful? Isn't it amazing?" And of course, the elders had to agree, for the plan was beautiful and amazing and glorious. And if it worked, if the thing could be done, they thought, it would be something completely different from what we have now. It would mean more of everything that the Lightwalkers loved so much. Of course, the plan would require a lot of work and effort, the elders thought. The plan would require mucking around in the darkness outside of the garden, and that is cause for pause, said the elders. It would be no picnic. There would be no partying. There would not be a holiday in paradise. You are, after all, descending into darkness. So the elders cautioned, it's not going to be fun. There is nothing in darkness except darkness. There is no love. There is no light. There is no power. Ah, but the pups who brought the plan didn't seem to mind so much to sacrifice. And so the elders said, why not? And besides, if the explorers could pull it off, what a wow that would be. And so the explorers packed their bags, bid their tearful goodbyes, walked the long walk out past the garden gate and into the darkness, and disappeared completely from view. Poof, they were gone, which worried the light walkers who stayed behind more than a little bit. It was kind of dramatic after all. It was kind of abrupt. It was like suddenly being cut off from a part of yourself, and it was without precedent. It was disturbing, but they trusted, and they tried not to worry. They waited and they watched. They watched and they waited, and when they had waited and watched to the limit of their patience, they started to talk about sending out a search party. What else were they to do? Something had to be done. What if something had inconceivably gone wrong? But just as they were about to form the search party, it happened. All of a sudden, the silence and the blackness of the darkness was broken by a flash and a sound. Then there was another flash and a sound, and then another, and pretty soon the flashes were like lightning, and the sound was like thunder. And the lightwalkers breathed a sigh of relief. Oh, the work had begun. And thus did the work go on. While the lightwalkers continued to exist in joy and bliss, the explorers worked hard in the darkness. There were flashes, and there were thunder, and there were crashes, and there was rumbles, and every once in a while a crackle of fire danced across the skin of the darkness. It was an exciting light and sound show like never before seen. The raw energy of it was contagious, and soon many of who had stayed behind just couldn't stand by watching anymore. They packed their bags and they ran off into the darkness to help. And that fed the fire, and the lightning flashed brighter, and the thunder crashed louder, and a fire crackled all over the skin of the dark, until, all of a sudden, nothing. Suddenly, all of the flashing and the thunder just stopped, just like that. One moment, chaos, and the next, nothing. At that point, the lightwalkers who had stayed behind looked at each other and were puzzled. They waited, but the silence continued. What could have happened? They would ask themselves. Has something gone wrong? They've wondered. They waited and they waited, and they waited to the limits of their worry, and when they surpassed their limit, they formed a search party. After all, this was highly irregular, unusual, and worrisome. This was without precedent. Something could have went wrong. But then, just as the search party was ready to leave the garden, with a flash of lightning and a sound of thunder, the chaos began anew. Just like before, lightning, thunder, and fire crackled over the darkness. The work had begun once again. And thus did the work go on. There were flashes and thunder and fire, and the lightwalkers gazed in fascination and amazement. It was a show unlike any other, and much more exciting than before. More energy, more power, more vibration. It was a pulsating energy ball, like an oscillating star going nova. And it was very exciting. In fact, it was so exciting that wave after wave of lightwalkers, overcome by childlike exuberance, jumped into the darkness without even bothering to pack. As they did, they fed the fire, and lightning flashed, and thunder rolled, and fire crackled, and then all of a sudden, darkness, and silence, and nothing. The Lightwalkers were startled. They looked at each other, they were puzzled, they waited and they wondered and they worried. Only this time it was obvious. Something must have went wrong. So they called for volunteers, and they sent a search party out into the darkness. And just as the searchers disappeared from view, the explorers come screaming out of the darkness. "Did you see that?" They were so breathless. "Wasn't it awesome?" they exclaimed with excitement. "Did you see that?" they said, over and over again, shaking all over. "Did you see it? Did you see it?" "We almost did it," they laughed. "We almost had it. But we need your help." "There was too much," they gasped. "There was too many, and it was too soon. We need your help." And of course, the Lightwalkers, who remained in the garden, agreed. What else could they do? The explorers were obviously onto something big and very exciting. So they said, "Okay, how can we help?" And at that, the explorers paused and thought about it for a few moments, and then they said, "Well, let's see. As you can see, it is extremely black down there, and we have a very hard time seeing. Sometimes we get lost in the darkness. Sometimes we get confused. So it would be great," said the explorers, "if some of you could act as guides. You know, point us in the right direction if we seem to be stumbling around too much." Now, at hearing that, hands shot up everywhere. Volunteers, let us call them guides, jumped at the chance. After all, who wouldn't? Who wouldn't want a special role in this divinely inspired plan? "We will help," said the guides. "We will provide assistance as required, and we will walk with you in the shadows and the valleys." Hearing this, the explorers smiled and nodded. Then they turned and they paused and they scratched their chins, and after a few moments they said, "Well, there is something else. As you know, there is no light down there in the dark, and it is really hard to see what we are doing. What is worse, when things start to get real crazy, we start to forget what we're doing, and we get all turned around in the chaos. So it would be great if some of you could just hold a light for us." And of course, hands shot up everywhere. Volunteers, let us call them light holders, jumped at the opportunity. Seeing the enthusiasm, the explorers smiled and thanked them. Then they turned and paused and they scratched their chins, and after a few moments they said, "Well, there is one final thing. As we keep saying, it's awfully dark down there, and there are so many working on the plan now, and the energy levels are at such fantastic levels that it can easily get out of control. We have to prevent that from happening," said the explorers, "until everything is ready. What we need," they said, "is someone to keep the lid on it until it's time." And of course, there was no shortage of volunteers despite the difficulty of this particular job. And so the explorers, the guides, the light holders, and the new energy keepers went out into the darkness to work. Those who stayed behind watched and waited, and for a long time they saw nothing move, but this time they didn't get worried. They knew everything was under control, and so they waited, without a limit to their patience, until a shout sprang up. "There!" someone screamed. "There in the darkness! Did you see that? Did you see that? Sparks!" Everybody looked, and sure enough, they could see the sparks in the darkness. To no one's surprise, these sparks grew quickly, and soon lightning, thunder, and fire crackled. The light and the energy was so intense. The power expanded and grew, and then, Just as it seemed like the energy and the fire had reached their ultimate, the energy started to hum and pulse, expanding and contracting like some giant cosmic egg. The energy would expand outward, reaching a raging crescendo of intense flame. Then it would back off from the peak. Then another cycle with a higher peak, and then another cycle, a higher peak, and then another and another. It was like a giant pulsating balloon of energy being puffed up and then deflated, puffed up and then deflated, each time the balloon straining against some unseen barrier that kept it contained within its own boundaries. The Lightwalkers watched the undulation in fascination, wide-eyed, awe-filled, never growing tired of the spectacle. But then, after what seemed like an eternity, but really was only a few moments in the creative consideration of spirit, it happened. Just as the crackling ball of fire was at its most intense ever, just as it seemed as if the heat from this forge of creation could not get any more intense, it happened. The Lightwalkers saw it happen, there, in the heat of an already intense fire, in the crackling of an engorged cellular balloon, there, a single brilliant explosion of light, and then another, and then another, and then 10 more, and then 1,000 more, 10,000 more, 1,000,000, 6 billion, and then a crack on the surface. The tendrils of fire racing across the skin of the darkness. An explosion, eyes widening, light, love, wonder, beauty, glory, power, happiness, joy, bliss, glorious. No words. Weeping. And then, just as it seemed the Lightwalkers would be overcome by glory, the procession began. Amongst cheering and laughter and celebration and glory, those who had entered into the darkness began to emerge. The explorers, the energy keepers, the light holders, the guides, even the search party. They all started to return, and they did so in chariots of magnificence. Brilliant gold, like angels of fire in an undefeatable army of God. And with them, with us, comes the fire and the transformation and in fulfillment of the plan. A new garden, more glorious than anything that we've ever imagined or experienced before. Like the magnificent phoenix rising from the ashes in all of its glory. Born again into the beauty of new creation. And now we can really begin. Because now you understand that we can make this so much better than any story we've ever read or was told. You have that ability within you. And I'm going to teach you how. I love you. And I hold the light for you and guide you as long as you will need me. And together, we write one hell of a story.